Hey there, it's Lucas here, and we were chatting about shoulders today, so I thought I would just talk a little bit about why it's important to hang, what hang therapy is really about, and where these ideas come from. This is a really weird, kind of poorly put together book, and I first heard about this, I think, from Ido Portal or something like that, and you can see it's just like a really weird book. I don't even know if it's still available, but basically this medical doctor is working with people with shoulders, and what he discovered is really one of the simplest things ever. And so we can take a look on this skeleton. This isn't the best skeleton, but you can kind of get an idea about the challenge that happens with your shoulders. Essentially on the roof of your shoulder, you're going to take your fingers, you can dig it in here. There's a ligament that makes up the roof of your shoulder. Maybe I'll post a photo later on. It's called your coracoacromial ligament. It's a terrible name. People call it the CA ligament. And remember, ligaments are bone to bone. So it's a bone to bone arch on the roof of your shoulder. And the way to think about that is, sometimes I like to use the analogy of like a leather belt. If you imagine you have kind of a leather belt arch on the top of your shoulder, that leather, if it gets old, if it gets unused, and it gets kind of hardened, it can start to collapse. So it's a coracoacromial ligament, and it forms an arch. Well, when it collapses, it can impinge upon one of your four rotator cuff muscles. Rotator cuff injuries are really problematic. Frozen shoulder, shoulder problems, inflammation, pain, all this stuff happens a lot. There's a number of different causes. I don't want to reduce it down to one cause, but a really big challenge is that we stop doing something called brachiation. I just did a video about this. You can check out on my Reels or my TikTok. And brachiation is this form of locomotion, right? If you have kids, when kids first learn to move, the first thing they do is they roll, and then they crawl, and then they walk. But what kids also do when they're young is you put your fingers out and they grab onto your fingers and you can hold them up. It's called something like the Palmer, what is it called? Palmer grasp reflex. It's a reflex that kids have to hang from their hands, and they can do it right away when they're young. And the idea, the theory behind this reflex is that we inherit it from primates when we needed to grab onto like our mother's fur, their hair, as our mom went swinging around the trees. And so we still have this ability, and we think, well, we don't need to do that anymore, so why would we need to hang? The reason you need to hang is because if you don't, that coracoacromial arch, that ligament, that bone-to-bone tissue can start to collapse, can start to impinge upon your shoulder and screw everything up. So whether we're talking about wrist, elbow, but especially shoulder, upper back stuff, it's really important that you keep that coracoacromial ligament, that roof of your shoulder, agile and in an arch shape. Think of it like an old belt. Let's imagine you go to your closet and you have an old leather belt and you bought it but you never wore it, but it's been 10 years, right? And for many of us, it's been 10 years since you've done any kind of brachiation. That ligament can start to get hard and stiff, just like that old leather belt. But that old leather belt, it's not wrecked. You just need to oil it up and start using it again. And within a couple of weeks, a couple of months, it'll be soft and agile again. The same thing is true when you start to brachiate. Let me show you over here. This is a yoga trapeze, but you can do this on a pull-up bar. You can do this with gymnastic rings. You can do this with the edge of a door, in fact. But the key thing is you need to start loading your shoulders. And when you first start, it can be helpful just to put your feet down on the ground. See how my feet are down? Or your big toes down on the ground. And eventually, you can get to the point where you're free hanging. And eventually, you might get to the point where you're actually swinging. And eventually, you might get back to the point when, like a 6-year-old, you're actually brachiating on monkey bars in the park. And again, if you think of that roof of your shoulder as collapsed, hardened, old, dried out leather belt, and then you think of that brachiation movement, we've inherited this, right, from our primate ancestors. If you start to get this back, that leather can start to soften, it can start to move again, and then suddenly you've got a lot healthier shoulders. So if you're just getting started with this, I wouldn't recommend this kind of hardcore hanging or swinging. It can be a little too much. But you can do this really simple passive hangs. I usually start people off with 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So feet could be down on the ground, arms all the way straight is really key. Set a timer for 30 seconds, take a break, shake it out, 30 seconds, take a break. And then as time goes on, you can move up onto your big toes. As time goes on, you can cross your ankles, and eventually you can free hang. Hope that's helpful. Appreciate you guys showing up here. Just a quick video. Hope to see you again soon. Feel free to drop any questions here.